Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's BU Professional Development webinar, Keeping It Relaxed, Managing Your Job Campaign Over the Summer. My name is Dan Gardner, and I've recently joined the Career Programs team in the Office of Alumni Relations. Today's webinar is sponsored by Boston University Alumni Relations and is offered to our 321,000 alumni around the globe. Throughout your career, BU is committed to helping you define and achieve your professional goals. We aim to do this by providing alumni with access to a series of valuable online tools and social media communities. It's important that we get your opinion on how we're doing, so we very much look forward to receiving your feedback via a survey that will be emailed to you later today. I know that we have alumni joining us today from places like Indonesia and Italy, from Montclair, New Jersey, Geneva, Illinois, Charlotte, North Carolina, San Juan, Puerto Rico, and as always, dozens of Massachusetts alumni from towns like Brookline, Auburndale, Clinton, Framingham, North Reading, and many more. For each and every one of you out there, please know that we really do value your opinion on this and every program that we offer. Now, before I introduce today's speaker, some brief housekeeping notes. As you know by now, this webinar is being hosted on the Adobe Connect online meeting platform. If you experience any trouble with the audio or visual portions of this presentation, please contact Adobe Connect at 1-800-422-3623. Today's presentation is being recorded and will soon be available for on-demand viewing on the Alumni Association website, found at bu.edu/alumni. Our speaker today is very eager to answer any questions that you have, and you are welcome to submit them throughout the presentation using the Q&A chat box you see to the left of your slides. We hope to get to as many questions as we can during today's webinar. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for the day. Presenting from New York, New York is Questrom School of Business alumnus Win Sheffield. Win is a career coach in private practice in New York. He offers strategies and guidance to support his clients to take their work to the next level or establish new careers. He coaches clients in delivering their message and delivers weekly 5-minute microcasts answering your career questions. Details of talks and microcasts are available at his website, www.winsheffield.com. Win has worked for Citibank, JP Morgan, and PricewaterhouseCoopers in strategy development and management consulting. He has an MBA from Boston University's Questrom School of Business and an undergraduate degree from Kenyon College. He has studied counseling at General Seminary and Myers-Briggs at the Young Institute. Win has run workshops at the New York Public Library, for BU of course, and for the Princeton, Wharton, and Penn clubs in New York, Silicon Valley, and London, as well as for industry groups such as NYSSA, P&G alumni, and others. Win, thank you so much for being here today, and I'm happy to say the floor is all yours.
Thanks a lot, Dan. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you are enjoying your summer. And today I wanted to pull together a few things which would give you a sense of how, in spite of the fact that you and everybody you talk to wants to be out at the beach, can move ahead in your career. So, as Dan said, I'm happy to take questions through that box on the left side of your screen. And I would also reiterate that any comments you have in the follow-up would be gratefully received by me as well. Today's material was developed from working with my clients, and I picked some things that they have found most valuable. I wanted to stay to 30 or 40 minutes in this portion of the talk, so I will be going through them relatively quickly to leave a little time at the end for you to ask questions. My overall goal as a coach is that you or my clients obtain a job that is enjoyable to you and pays well, and that you obtain it as efficiently and painlessly as possible. So these suggestions for the summer will be congruent with those objectives. So we wanted to start by asking you where you are in this process, and you'll see a question on your screen, and we'll give you a few seconds to fill in which most accurately describes where you are so I can address my thoughts to you more specifically.
Great. And like Wynn said, you can go ahead and participate in the poll by clicking right on that screen. The question is simply, which statement most closely applies to you? Are you a recent graduate currently looking for your first job? Are you looking to change jobs or change careers? Are you not currently looking for a job, but you anticipate an upcoming job search? Or are you not anticipating an upcoming job search, but you're just curious about this topic and hearing what Wynn has to say? So go ahead and we'll give you another moment to submit your response. And Wynn, it looks like a lot of people are saying B. They're currently
Okay.
looking to change jobs or change careers.
All right. So I will assume you're active in the market. Let me move ahead here. Okay. So the realities of summer, as I indicated, are that we all expect to be not working and relaxing. And at the same time, in my experience, one of the most important things we can do with a career is to keep always on the back burner, and when you're actively looking, as most of you are, on the front burner, some activity towards that. So the idea here is that we want to do something over the summer that involves no hard sell, no guilt, and something more entertaining. So we'll look and see what we can do about that. Job market realities are that one of the biggest months of the year for hiring is September. So work that we put in now is more than likely to pay off well. Okay, so I'm going to introduce 4 ideas here for summer networking or summer career work. One is be proactive. It is easy to think of a job search as something that we are reacting to, looking at ads and whatnot. So we're going to go through and see how we might change that a little bit. The other is to know what we're selling. There's an awful lot of talk about how to sell yourself. And I want to go back to the fundamentals of looking at what we're selling. The third is it's summer. You want to be gentle with your network and not put them under a lot of pressure. So asking the right contact, the right question is something you want to think about. And last, less formal language. In short, learn how to tell stories to get your points across. So we'll start with the 2 approaches to the job market. One is job searching. We go to ads, we ask our contacts where there are jobs that we might get. We then do our best to adjust our resume and what we say to people to become the ideal candidate so that we will be seriously considered for that job that we found. Then we apply to the job, which requires a great deal of work in my experience, and then we repeat this process. So this is something that most people will do, and every job campaign, every part of your job seeking will involve some job searching. So now we would like to ask you how long you've been at that process, assuming that you have.
Great. So a lot of people did indeed indicate that they are in the middle of a job search. So go ahead and you can indicate how long you've been job searching, whether it's less than a month, 1 to 2 months, 3 to 5 months, 6 months, or longer. Or if you're not currently searching, you can certainly indicate that as well. And we'll give you just another moment to wrap up this question. And actually, when it's looking pretty evenly
It is.
distributed.
Yeah. Slight emphasis towards the latter end.
Yep, yep.
Oh, there we go. Up 1 to 2 months is coming up. Okay, great. Thank you. So there is another approach, as I indicated, and that is focusing on what is important to you. If you share your enthusiasm with others, you will get them on board. They will be interested to hear what it is that you're interested in doing. Now, this assumes that you're going out and talking to people who already have some connection with you. You might know them professionally, you might know them socially, you might be referred to them by somebody who you know professionally or socially, or they might be someone who shares an affiliation, like being a BU alum, with you. All of those people, because of their mutual connection, will be interested to hear what is important to you. And thus they will give you input so that you can adjust how the things that are important to you show up in the marketplace. So you can find out, if you're moving from one firm to another, what that firm sees as the most important thing in your career. You can find out from people who are in different areas, if you're thinking of leaving your industry, what things are like in their industry. The idea is that by exploring, you will get referred on to other people, and thereby you will get answers and increase the size of your network. So one of the things that we think about in any of this is that we're in a modern age. Everything ought to go fast. I ought to be able to, for instance, click on a job site, get my material turned into them, and they'll turn it around and get back to me. The sad fact is it doesn't work like that. And there's another analogy that I use that I think is much more accurate. And it's not a 21st century analogy, it's a 19th century analogy. Imagine if you wanted to do something like find the source of the Nile. If you did that, what would you do? You'd have to go to people and say to them, I want a lot of money because I'm going to need a ship, and I'm going to need geographic expertise, and I'm going to need medical expertise, and all the rest of it. And they'll say, well, where are you going? And they'll say, well, I don't really know. What do you mean you don't know? Yes, I don't know, but I know what I want to do. I want to find the source of the Nile. So, on the strength of not knowing where they're going exactly, people gave them financed having a ship and the medical advice and the geographic expertise and all of that, so that they could go to Alexandria and get on a smaller ship and start to go up the Nile. And that process, what does it look like? Does it look like get out, go to the end of the Nile, go up and find the first thing you look for and say, there it is, there's the source of the Nile? No, it's not like that. And it's just like your job exploration, your job campaign. You are going to go down one path. In this case, for the analogy, you're going up a stream or a small tributary. You're going to get to the end of it and find out, nope, that's not it. You come back down and you go up the same thing, a different one, doing the same thing the next day. So you are, in fact, doing this process over and over again. Now, what does an explorer do? An explorer, at the end of the day, is not going to decide, well, I didn't find it up that creek, I'm giving up, I'm going back. No, the full expectation is that you repeat the process again and again. When you run into quicksand, you go around it and keep moving. So that is the process, and it has to do with keeping with it, sticking with it in a way that you have a can-do attitude and hopefully a sense of humor about the whole thing. What are we selling when we get to the job market? There's an awful lot of emphasis on how to sell this strategy and that strategy for how to make yourself more heard in the marketplace. What is often forgotten in that is that you first need to learn about the product, which is you. If you understand some of the attributes that you bring to the table, some of the things that you are good at that you would like to do again, then you're going to get a lot further with people than if you just pretend that you're good at something and do a lot of bells and whistles, smoke and mirrors, if you will, to keep your attention on your job, to get the attention you want. If you have some ideas about what it is that you do, and they may not be specific, there's a temptation to think, well, I need to know exactly that I need to be a second underhand mid-office trader assistant or I won't be able to get a job. No, what you need to say is, I'm very good at acting in a fast-paced environment. I've seen the trading floor or I've been on the trading floor, and I'm interested to find out which kinds of positions are going to be most appropriate for somebody who brings my analytic skill, my ability with people to that conversation. So you don't need to be able to name exactly what you want to do, but you do need to be able to articulate some things about yourself. And if you can do that, then I think there's less to worry about how to sell yourself, and it's easier to and if you don't know these things yourself, you can reach out to people who you do know and say, what do you see me as good at? Where have you seen my strengths most in the workplace? So that's the second point, that you should know the product before you figure out how to sell it. The third one is, we're going to be working with other people. We're going to ask them what it is that they can do for us. So we want to ask people for things that they have. If I'm in your network, I want to support you somehow. If you ask me for something that I do not have, how do I feel? I'll be disappointed. I came to the meeting wanting to assist you, and as best I could, I was going to do that. And then when you ask me, say, for something I don't have, like a job or a referral to a job, I'm going to feel disappointed. If we ask people about their ex-boss or their profession or what things are like in their organization, then they're going to feel good about having assisted us. So I want to go to them and ask them for for things that they are able to provide. And if you're getting an answer like, wow, I'll think about that, or let me tell you about how that works, that's the kind of response you want to get. If you're getting an answer like, I'll keep you in mind, or send me your resume and I will forward it to HR, that means you're not asking them for something that they can really be useful for. And you want to make them feel useful. That means that people what I'm saying is, people will want to be part of your success if they can help you towards it. So if you inspire them by saying some of the things that you're interested in doing, then you're going to be in a position to get them engaged and interested. When you think about your strategy and how you want to approach the job market, you want to say, how are they going to feel after I have this conversation? For instance, if we're asking the kinds of questions that are interesting for them to answer, then they're going to be engaged. So if we have contact with a senior person, we should have the basic questions answered already. Because if we ask them, well, what does your company do? Or what are the basic functions done in this department? Then they're not going to be very engaged. On the other hand, if you're talking to a junior person, who may be the first person you want to speak to, they're going to be happy to brag about the things that go on basically in the department, because that's the level at which they're operating. Senior person you'll go to later with more complex questions. So the other thing to think about as far as how they'll feel after the conversation is you want to shift them to get to be on your side by asking them questions about what goes on and how things work. They're going to think of themselves as a resource to support you. If we go to them with questions about, do you have a job or do you know have anybody who has a job, they're going to switch from supporting us to evaluating us. So when they're evaluating us, they are looking for reasons to eliminate us. They are looking for reasons not to forward our name on. And then, funnily enough, we're desperate to have them think about us seriously if we make a great impression on them and we're asking them for a job. Then are they going to forward us on to anybody else? Probably not, because they're impressed with us and they'll only keep your name for themselves. So you want to think about that when you go forward. You don't want them to turn into evaluators. You want to turn them into people who will be supporting us. At the same time, when we need to know information in order to be the best candidate and compete with all the other people who are in the job market and competing for the jobs we do, if we don't get the answers that we need, if we're not able to answer all the questions that an interviewer will ask us, then we're going to be at a disadvantage. So we really need that information from people. So let me say something that people often say in the job market. I'm a great programmer. I can really do a good job for you. Or I'm a terrific customer service representative. I really do a good job in that. What are those people doing? They're making a claim. They're saying, I'm such and so. You should believe me. Now, the next step up from that, which is a whole lot better, is results. I'm a great customer service representative. Of the 95 people who I'm in charge of, I got a top 5 grade for the survey that my company did for 85% of them. And I got a grade 4 for all but the last 1%. So all of that is well and good. In the summer, especially, you want to be thinking about a way to approach things around a pool. And spouting off claims or results is not the way to do it. On the other hand, if you tell them a story, you might do a little better. So let me give you an example of a story. So I was hired right out of BU into Citicorp, and within a few weeks of my being there, my supervisor, Nancy, called me into her office and suggested that I take over the forecast from Keith. So I walked down to Keith's office, Keith being one of my colleagues, and said, Keith, what's this forecast? And this was 1979, so he showed me a piece of paper that was about 3.5 feet wide, and as I remember, 2.5 feet tall, maybe not quite that big, but it seemed pretty intimidating, and there were a lot of numbers on it, and I knew, as much as I'd learned from BU, I knew I was really not good at doing a lot of number crunching because they had so much that was sold each month, so much that was redeemed each month, and it all built from January through to the end of the year for 14 products. So I said to Keith, why isn't this automated? And he said, it can't be. I don't know about you, but when somebody says it can't be, I think, no. So I went back to Nancy and I said, Nancy, I can automate this with all the confidence that I had at that time. And she said, but John wants the forecast by Friday, John being our boss. And I said, okay, let's go talk to John. So I went to John and said, John, I can automate this. And he said, can you do it by next Wednesday? And I thought to myself, sure. Well, in the end of the day, I ended up working more evenings and a little bit over the weekend than I wouldn't have liked to, but I did. And the following Wednesday, I had created a forecast, an automated forecast. And as a result, the forecast that was done quarterly could then be done monthly. And Nancy was happy, and John was happy, and Rich, the head of the division, was happy. Now, when I'm giving this to an audience, I ask people what they've learned about me from that. And what they learn is things like that I think out of the box, that I'm innovative, that I'm willing to put in the work to get things done, and all of that. Those are the kinds of conclusions which the audience draws on my behalf. I don't have to say those things. So when I'm giving claims or results, the audience has to be on my side to agree with me. But when I tell a story, I end up giving them some facts and specific facts. And based on those specific facts, they draw conclusions on my behalf. So if you take away nothing else from today's seminar, I would ask you to think about the kinds of accomplishments that you've had. And you'll notice when I told it, I didn't just tell the good parts. I told the problems that I had, like I couldn't add up those numbers and that I didn't plan well enough so that I had to work over the weekend. But in the end of the day, I showed how I overcame those things and created a result. So we'll have time for questions if you have them about that. But I wanted you to get that as best you could without any interaction. So let's take a quick look at the four things that we addressed here. One is be proactive. When we let people know where we're heading, assisting us becomes attractive. People like associating with somebody who's heading somewhere, and it doesn't have to be a specific job. It can be attributes of the job, or it can be things that we want to bring to the workplace. Define yourself specifically. When we are proactive, knowing what we are offering people can be by articulating what we know we're looking to offer, people can be on the lookout for specific things on our behalf. The right contact for the right request. People tend to say things like, I've used up my network. It's summer. Give them a break. Don't force them to find you a job or find somebody who has a job. Ask them for the things that are easy for them to provide that you need to know from them. Otherwise, if you ask them for things that they don't have, they'll be disappointed, which is not good at any time of year, especially in summer. Less formal language in the form of a story rather than formal business language is something that will open people up in a time when they don't want to be thinking about work. Otherwise, you can engage them by talking about stories. So I've gotten through that and left some time for questions. And so if Dan, how are we doing on the question box? Is anybody, oh, here we have, I'm sorry, a poll to begin
Yeah.
before we have the questions.
Yeah, so we certainly have plenty of time for questions, so go ahead and type those questions into the box to the left of the screen. But you'll also see that we have one final poll question, and it really is getting at that recap that Win just went through. So which of these four approaches that Win has laid out are you most confident in already? Being proactive, knowing what you're selling, using the right contact for the right request, or telling stories. So you can go ahead and participate in that poll, our third and final poll. But we also welcome your questions in the Q&A box off to the left. Yeah, great. And it looks like people have certainly different strengths. People are feeling confident in knowing what they're selling, about 37, 38%, being proactive, 27%, The right contact for the right request, right around 10%, and telling stories is about 25%. So people are looking most confident in the first two items that you've talked about, Win, and maybe a little less confident in the second two. Is that
Okay.
typical for the folks that you've worked with as clients? Would you say?
I don't know. I would guess. So I'm impressed with the proactive approach because that is the key. If you can recognize where you're doing a job search and where you're doing a job campaign, that will be very important to recognize because then when you recognize that both of them are active, a lot of people fall back on doing a job search rather than a job campaign. So that's terrific if you're doing that. Um, Telling stories, um, knowing what you're selling is obviously important, and telling stories is one of the key ways, especially in summer, to get your information across to people. I would encourage you to think about this from a point of view you might not have, which is one of the things I didn't say, because it's not specifically so much a summer thing, is don't try to do your job campaign or your job search for that matter on your own. Get out there and find other people who are in your, well, not even in your field, but at your level, who are also trying to keep maybe juggle a job or try to find something quickly. If you have them working with you, then you can really help them by using whichever one of these things is your strength, and they'll help you with whichever one is their strength so that you can balance out and be the best candidate moving forward. So it looks like the right contact for the right request is the ones that people are struggling with the most. If there are any
Yeah,
questions on that, then I would be happy to answer them.
sure. So we do have a couple follow-up questions on that piece, the right contact for the right request. One of the questions that I see here, um, how many times is too many times to follow up with someone? Kind of what's that sweet spot where you don't want to be annoying necessarily, but you do want to make sure that you're getting your request in front of that person.
Okay, so that depends on the person who you're speaking to. If you're taking somebody junior or at your level out to lunch, then presumably they're, going to be happy to have you take them out to lunch again. I wouldn't do it the next week, but I think the normal thing for most of these people is a month or 2 months, assuming that they are the person who you have more questions for. As we move through our campaigns, our interests may shift, the focus may shift from one specific function to another. If someone's an expert on one function, you might not want to take them to lunch again. One of the things you might do, though, is to have, if not a newsletter, an email which you adjust for each audience to let them know every month or so where you are in the process. If you're talking to a more senior person, I'll go by the guidance that somebody senior gave to me when I asked him for assistance at one point. He was very helpful and gave me some ideas about how to move ahead and things to look into and even somebody to talk to. And then I said, "May I check back with you?" He said, "Yes, if you've got something interesting for me, then by all means check back." So he was quite senior. He reported to the CEO. So I took him at his word. And what I did was, I never did have to check back with him, but what I did was I sent him articles that might be interesting in his field that were relevant for his industry.
Great. And we have another question here, just clarifying what you mean by using up, overusing that network. How do you avoid hitting up the same people too much? What advice would you have for someone who's running into that challenge?
Well, let me give you another analogy to look at this. If we're looking into a company that we're not familiar with, or if we're changing fields and looking into a field that we're not so familiar with. It's as if we're flying over that area in a plane at 50,000 feet. So at 50,000 feet, we're going to see a broad scope of the landscape, and we're not going to see a lot of detail. So our questions will be broader. If we've found out some stuff, when we circle back to that person a month later, we're going to be at 30,000 or 20,000 feet. So we're going to get a completely different picture of the landscape. So the kinds of questions that we're able to ask are going to be based on what we've learned, both from them and the other people we've spoken to in the interim. So you're not going to bore people as long as you're asking them questions that are at their level. So you want to think about what you learn from them and what you can learn from them and recognize. So you're not circling back to them and say, the first time you're speaking to them, do you have a job? And then circling back to them a month later, do you have a job yet? That's not a good way to use your network. So if you're using your network in a way that's where they're engaged and they're interested in what you're doing and will be interested to see what progress you're making, then the questions you have, the more detailed and refined questions, will be something that they can get their teeth into afresh because it's not where you were the last time you spoke to them.
Great. And I've got another question here from Lori. Lori asks, any advice on best ways to connect? For example, if a person can be found on LinkedIn, but that message box is only limited to a sentence or two. So this is, you're looking to add someone to your network and hopefully have a more robust conversation down the road. But you've only got a sentence or two to kind of make your case within the context of LinkedIn. What would you recommend to someone dealing with that?
So first of all, the person you're connected with on you're reaching out to on LinkedIn is somebody who you are connected with. Just we'll start out with three scenarios. One is you're connected with them. Two is someone you know is connected with them. And three, they're part of an affiliate group, like they're a fellow BU alum. So for the first one, it's somebody you know. It may not be somebody you know well, and it's much harder if it's somebody you've connected with who you don't know at all. But it's possible. It's just less likely that you'll be successful. So for the person that you have a connection with, then you say, hi, it's been a long time. We worked together 10 years ago. In the interim, I've been doing X, keeping it short. I notice from your background you are, and that's the key. You want to relate it to something that means something to them. So you are finding something in their profile which is the reason you're speaking to them and you want to ask them. Obviously, if they're a total stranger, they'll have no interest in providing you with a job, so you can't ask them for a job or if they know somebody with a job. Then there are the people who are connected to your friends or colleagues or ex-colleagues. In that case, I would go with the question to your colleague or your friend and say, I see that you have Harry or Mary Jo in your network. I'm interested in finding out more about X. It looks like they have experience doing X. Could you assist me? Now, if you can get out of LinkedIn and go through email for that, obviously you could have more space, but I don't think you need to say a lot more than what I said just then. For the third group, the affiliate people, you're going to go back to something along the lines of seeing something in their background which is relevant for you so that you can say to them, I'm interested in X, and I see from your background that you've had experience with X. I'm wondering if you would have time to connect with me. Here's my email.
All right, great. That's very helpful. Thank you for walking through those scenarios for us. The questions really are rolling in, so we'll shift over to another one. So we've got a couple questions here from more experienced folks who are trying to sell age as an asset. Can you talk a little bit about how you would recommend someone prepare, maybe to tell some of those stories and really sell their age and experience as an asset as they are looking to change
Yeah,
jobs or maybe take on a new job after being laid off after a number of years?
right. So age is an asset for precisely the reason you say, because you have rich stories to draw on. There are a couple of things that people are worried about with age. Some of it's just pure prejudice. If you're in advertising and you're over 29 and a half years old, you're going to be a minority and you're probably not going to get the job. Not to say that I haven't had clients who've done it and there are specific reasons why it can work, but putting that aside, people are afraid that one, an older person isn't going to have energy just physically to be able to do it. Two, that they're going to have a I know this better than you point of view. So the way that I recommend couching your experience is in the same terms that a younger person would use. When we are new in the marketplace, we go out there and say, we're interested in this, we can do this, we're looking forward to this, we want to learn this. And when we get older, we tend to be, well, we've done that, we've been there, we know how to do that. Why not combine both and say, this is what I've brought to the table. And the reason that I'm talking to you is because I want to move in this direction. I want to apply what I've done in this field. This is how I want to use the experience I've had to move forward to get into this digital or whatever thing it is that new. So you want to make it clear that your focus is in the future and that the past is just derivative stuff that you will be happy to use in getting to where you're heading.
Great. All right, we have another question here. One of the things that you mentioned early on in the presentation was that September is a really big time for hiring. And so we have a question here from Kathleen, and she's asking, is there any way to get ahead of job postings? You know, where should folks who are looking for a job during the summer focus their attention in terms of, you know, maybe getting a jump start on some of those listings that might be coming down the pipe for September? Is there any way that you know of to do that?
So, one of the things that I would say is that it's going to take some time for some jobs to get to a listing. Why not get to the job before it's even listed? Many jobs are not listed. The statistics are overall that three-quarters of jobs are not gotten through listings if they are ever listed. One quarter of job listings, one quarter of people get jobs through job listings. But somebody once said that the odds of a hiring manager seeing a resume that is submitted online are 1 in 15,000. So let's say you're 10 times better at writing a cover letter and producing a resume that somebody will look at. That means your odds of getting your resume in front of the eyes of the hiring manager are 1 in 1,500. That's those when somebody puts in an ad, they get 5 or 600 resumes. It's not a very productive way of getting a job, it turns out. So the best thing to do is to develop those contacts, let them know what you stand for, and then you will be offered jobs that may be exactly what it is that you do, or maybe something you've never heard of but fits the profile of the, as we were talking earlier about the product that you're selling. The product you're selling is somebody who is good with people, somebody who is focused on research or analytics or whatever you happen to be focused on. That way you can focus on presenting yourself most effectively for what you really want to do, rather than shifting for every job ad to try to be the person that they appear to need. And when they're putting together the ad, it's not that they need exactly those things. It's that they're part of a thing they're trying to do is game the system so that they get, of the 500 or 600 resumes they're getting, so that some of them are more relevant. So that's what I'm suggesting, is move away from focusing your on a search and move more towards, for specific jobs, and move more towards a campaign where the jobs will be offered to you, and some of them would might have made it to an ad, but your job is to get to them before they even make it to an ad.
All right, great. And I appreciate you making that distinction once again between the job search and the job campaign. That is something that we had a question on. So I think you hit two birds with one stone with that answer. So thank you.
Okay.
We've got another two-part question here, and it's about salary negotiation. So as folks are kind of taking this time in the summer to really define their own goals, their own objectives, their own passions, and thinking about going into interview settings and going in with a game plan about salary negotiation. We have one question from a more recent graduate standpoint. So, how would you recommend someone go about preparing for that in one of their earliest jobs early on in their career? And then coming at it from a different perspective, someone who maybe was laid off and are looking to jump back into the workforce, but they're running up against this brick wall of, well, you made too much money in your last job, and how do you go about negotiating that and getting beyond that barrier?
Okay. So one optimistic thing that's happening is, I know in California, and I think soon in Massachusetts, it will be illegal to ask what you made in the past. So that should help. Having said that, it's a very hard sale, for the second question, to convince people you want to make less money. And the way you do it is to go back to what I said about presenting yourself in the marketplace as heading somewhere. I'm going to be learning about this. I recognize that it's outside my immediate field of expertise. I am happy to take a lower salary because the work that I'm doing, the contribution that I will be able to make to your company, is important to me, and I can get by on such and such a salary. Going back to the first question, and for this question, first thing you do is research. There are, on my website, on a resources page, there are mentions of some places like Glassdoor and salary.com where you can go and get not the exact salary for the exact market, for the exact level that you're in, but you'll get some data points so that you can interpolate and figure out what a reasonable salary range would be for the geographic area that you're in, for the level that you're at. So know that the information you're going to get is not perfect, but you can get a very good idea of a range. The other thing you can look at is go to Indeed.com, which has tons of ads, and see what kinds of offers there are in those ads. That's another good source of salary information. The third thing I want to say about salary is people are very cagey about it, and it's hard to put them off. But you can say, I would like to find out more about the responsibilities of the job before we talk about specific salary. Because as often as not, when somebody gets interested in a candidate, they will change the responsibilities of the job, especially as you get more senior, to adapt to what you're bringing to the table, which will, one, make them interested in paying you more, and two, making it reasonable to wait to figure out what it is, that the salary, what the right salary is for that position. The fourth thing I want to say is that you by how you are in an interview, by how well you tell stories and let people know about the value that you have brought to whatever. If you're fresh out of school, you have brought a lot of value to groups that you've worked with, to specific results you've gotten in school, to papers or lab results or anything else that you've done. So know that all of that evidence that you bring of past success is going to affect your salary. And the last thing that I would encourage you to think about with salary is when you get to the point of negotiating a salary, you're in a position of power in a way you are not until they make an offer. So recognize that you are in a position to negotiate at that point. I don't want you to look at the negotiation as being on opposite sides of the table. I want you to look at the position of you sitting side by side with your future boss, looking into a common future. A common future involves you not being worried about having to get another job because you're paid too low. A common future involves you not getting so much money that the boss can't hire other people to help you do your job. So you're looking side by side with that boss into a common future where you can find that commonality for your salary. So I know those are somewhat disjointed, but those are the 5 thoughts that I wanted to bring to answer those 2 questions.
Great. And you did mention that some of these resources, some of the sites that you mentioned can be found on your website,
Yep.
which I did advance the slide so we can see that there,
Okay, great.
www.winsheffield.com. So if you were curious about some of the sites that Win mentioned, you can certainly find those resources there. We do have another question here from Pam. Now, with full-time job creation dwindling in many areas, how do we modify your recommendations in terms of looking for a contract opportunity, a project, or a potential client?
So there are clear advantages to doing part-time work, and there are clear advantages to doing contract work. And you want to be clear why those are important to you and emphasize that when you're speaking to people. So you can say, I need some flexibility to deal with my elderly parent, my children, my other jobs, or I'm looking for the variety which part-time or contract work has, or I really find myself most valuable in setting something up and then training someone to take it over. So those are the kinds of opportunities that I'm looking for. So there are some real advantages to any kind of work, and you just want to be clear for yourself which ones are important to you. Now, if part-time or um, contract work is not your first choice, you can still hold yourself out as being an excellent person to consider for those, and you can articulate reasons why you would be good. You stick with things, you're good at managing ongoing processes or people, or you really like contributing inside an organization and sticking with something, all of those stuff. And then you say, realistically, I know that the marketplace may not offer that, and so I've found it very fulfilling, or I would find it very fulfilling to do this part-time or contract work. So you're presenting yourself as being flexible, and this is another thing going back to the difference between a job search and a job campaign. In a job search, you feel compelled to present yourself into that particular position, which means you get kind of rigid in how you're presenting yourself. Whereas when you're presenting yourself in a campaign, you can say, I have these specific interests. And then when you find out about something else, oh, I hadn't thought about that. That's interesting for me too. All of these conversations, whether it's for a job search or job campaign we're talking about, are in the realm of networking conversations, which is different than a job interview. In a job interview, you're really clear that you want to do whatever it is that they want on whatever terms they want, full-time, part-time, or whatever. So again, just to distinguish the informal networking, which we've been talking about because it's summer, versus the hard-nosed interviewing, which is a whole nother topic.
So I've got one final question here, and then we'll be, certainly sensitive to everyone's time and wrap up right around the top of the hour. And it comes from Beth. So, and it's in a similar vein. She's an experienced professional, expecting a professional salary, but so many of the postings that she's seeing are geared toward lower salary employees. Is there a good way to up the responsibilities and the salary? So would you recommend someone in her shoes apply to those lower salary positions and then look to negotiate the responsibilities and the salary? Or, in thinking about it in the context of a job campaign, do you weed out some of those postings even though they're most abundant?
So when you think about what a hiring manager is doing when they're placing an ad, they're the most ads are for either C-suite people right at the top of the company because they're so important and their responsibilities are broad enough to be well defined in a job. If you're CMO, Chief Marketing Officer, you know that you're going to be dealing with marketing and the details of how that happens is going to be negotiated between you and the CEO. So it's very defined. Same thing with junior positions. There's stuff that has to be done that is day-to-day stuff. It's very well defined. They hire people who haven't had the opportunity to develop a lot of judgment on how to handle things in the workforce. So it's relatively easy to place ads for those kinds of jobs. The jobs in the middle, the reason they're not there is they're not filled largely through job ads. So you really want to think about articulating what you want to bring to the table and going out and using your direct network, your secondary network, the people they know, and your affiliate network, and presenting yourself as interested in something. It's tempting to want to present yourself as I can do all things for all people, and nobody believes you because nobody does want to do all things for all people. So they know that you're presenting an uninteresting option for them. So you want to think about how you can present yourself out there as heading towards something and being open to other stuff. You can, and I've had clients who have done it, talk a job up a little or explain how you're willing to come down a little. But if you're coming down at any significant level of responsibility, then they're going to assume that in 6 weeks or 6 months, when you get a better offer, you're going to leave. And the last thing they want to do is spend all that time looking again, getting into the job market and going through those 600 resumes. So I hope that answers the question. I want to point out one thing on this slide. I have done 5-minute answers to many, many career questions, 70 or so, and those are on my website if you want to look. In addition to which, I am more than happy to, I have my email's there, drop me a line, we'll figure out a time when we can talk. If you're in Boston, I'm going to be heading up through Boston on the 5th of August, which is a weekend, but I'd be happy to meet with you if you want to set something up then. Dan, over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Win. We really do appreciate your time and your perspective on especially all these great questions that we got from our audience, and we appreciate the content of your presentation. And we certainly wish everyone well. Everyone who is in a job search, hopefully you can transform that into a job campaign. And we're certainly wishing you well. And again, please take Win up on his offer. Send him an email, connect with him, and continue these conversations beyond the hour. So yes, on behalf of the BU Alumni Association, thank you. My thanks also go out to all of our guests for participating today, and I specifically want to thank those of you who have donated to BU in the past. We couldn't put programs like this on without your support. We have another excellent webinar coming up during Alumni Weekend in September titled Boosting Your Career Confidence with clinical psychologist Dr. Diane Kern. So I'd encourage all of you to visit our website at bu.edu/alumni/events to see the full schedule of opportunities coming up. As always, if you or any BU alum that you know would be interested in presenting a professional development webinar, or if you have a topic you'd like to showcase for the BU Alumni Association, please feel free to contact me at the Alumni Relations Office or by email at dangard@bu.edu. Thank you everyone for your time. I hope you have a great day or a great evening wherever you might be.